Welcome to the Sunspice Wisdon Show. I'm your host, Ashley Welch, and today is the absolutely beautiful Sydney Hance. Sorry, I was hearing an echo. You know when you hear an echo in your voice and you're like, that's going to throw me off. So today we are here to talk about the power of touch. So before we dive into this topic, because it is one that we are both obviously passionate about, I want to just make a little disclaimer. We are going to be talking about the importance of touch in relation to the immune system, and we are going to be talking about current events such as COVID-19. And as we are talking about it, I want to make sure that it is 100% clear that both Sydney and I are well aware of the severity of the situation. We are well aware that this is impacting lives, and we are well aware that it is important to talk about this topic, not from a place of shaming and from a place of love. So that is just something I want to make very, very clear as we start to dive into this topic of conversation that is, I know, very emotional for so many people, including us.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Sydney, thank you for coming on.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. I'll give you just a quick little background about Sydney and I. We have known each other since we were teenagers, but we're never really close until several months ago when she came in and she walked into the Sunspice Health Bar, and we got to do a little reuniting. And it was wonderful to get to know her as a woman, not a girl, and to have been able to see her sort of transform into this motherly goddess over the years via Facebook, and then get to really connect with you in person, and then dive deep into our 7-week goddess workshop that we did just this fall, starting last September. And so maybe just give a quick little, like just
Who am I?
Who are you? And kind of maybe chat a little bit about why you are very passionate about this topic before I dive in.
Yeah, for sure. Like Ashley said, my name is Sydney, and who am I? I am a wife and a mom, and that is at the core of my heart,
which is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have 2 kiddos who are 6 and 4. My daughter has special needs, and that is a huge part of my life. And my role is navigating her world and helping her. We just moved from Oregon to Washington. COVID has totally rocked our world in a whole bunch of ways. We got stranded on vacation
in Hawaii, right?
Hawaii.
Yeah. I remember I was like, that sounds so nice. And you were like, it wasn't.
Not as nice as it sounds. A lot to be thankful for. But yeah, this year has been full of transformation and yeah, I think what makes me passionate about this topic, there's probably a lot of layers, but being a mom and seeing the impact of our connection as children grow. I think I have a unique perspective in that as I watch my daughter navigate the world with a unique mind and a unique way of connecting with people.
Yeah.
And I just love people. I'm passionate about people, passionate about connection, about community. And that's kind of where this fire I'm feeling stems from.
Yeah, totally. The one thing that I do want to take the time to share about Sydney and I, and something that we share together and can kind of connect really intimately on, is that within this passion around the importance of physical touch and connection is the fact that we've both experienced the complete heart wrench that comes with being physically abused and sexually abused, and even deeper, we've both been raped. So as we move into this conversation, you're talking to 2 people that have gone through the most intense, abusive type of experience that you possibly can. And to an outsider, it could seem like, well, how are they so passionate about touch and connection when they've been rocked? But it is within these sort of dark experiences that we've also gotten to shed and feel the light of the opposite side of that, which is that when you can experience physical touch in the most intimate ways that is consensual, it can be one of the most healing experiences that you can experience. And as a mother, obviously, it's at the center of our world. So I just want to start out by kind of setting the tone for this conversation, because it is really passionate and it stems from I think a lot of trauma that we have transformed and are still in the process of transforming into.
Yeah, definitely. I would imagine that we're not alone in that, coming from that place. And it took a while for me to figure out like why I'm so passionate about that, and unpacking some of that. Hopefully that can give some insight to other people who have been in that place too, of like, this feels like such a central thing. Why am I passionate about this? Why am I hurting around this topic? And our experience is unfortunately really common.
Yeah. And you were 15 and I was 17, a little bit older, but still in those very formative years, where you assume the world is beautiful and safe and wonderful because, that's what you know.
Yeah.
So do you want to start sort of diving into kind of maybe we should start about how COVID has really rocked your world on a personal note, and also within the community that you were in Portland, and what that sort of shift has been like.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I think this is important to say, like, COVID has been a blessing to us, and the changes in the world has made it so we're able to be together as a family. We're able to have made a big move. What I feel like I've lost is community, connection, and I've had to really dig into my strength to be able to stand up and feel differently than a lot of people. That's been a really kind of scary experience for me. I've watched how it's affected my children as they've been real removed from their life for almost a year now.
Wow. And your oldest son is he 5?
He's almost 7. He's in first grade.
First grade.
Yeah.
And what has it been like for him?
We have worked hard to protect him from a lot. I think that's just the way that we have gone forward. So a lot of this, he was unaware that, we were stuck in Hawaii and he thought, this is great. We're on a long vacation while I'm like, crying behind the closed doors and things. So I would say emotionally, he's in a great place. But he's really similar to me where, people and connecting and conversation and physical touch is hugely important. And I've seen him really, I think, regress in his ability to relate, to communicate, to process his own emotions, all things that we gain from being in communities.
Right.
And I can see that.
I know it's interesting, even just the idea of not being able to go into certain people's homes. The people that you love and connect with so much, and all of a sudden you're not allowed to be in their sort of personal, intimate domain. Yeah. And what that does, as an adult, it affects you, but as a child, it's like, it affects you in such a heart way, because there's not a lot of rationalizing it yet. Yeah. You don't have those tools and those skills yet. So, what I've seen, which sounds like what you've seen too, is just this sort of, like, it's a heartbreak. Yeah. Sure. And we all, as children, we have these sort of like first heartbreaks that happen, but this is a big one for them.
Huge. Yeah. Yeah. I just dove real deep into this last night as my mind was just kind of mulling things over. And so I found some really fascinating studies. And one that kind of relates to what we're talking about is, I wrote it down because I didn't want to mess it up. So UW did it. And it was this study on a child's ability to regulate their behavior based on what they see from the adults around them, right? So they had a little baby in a room. He was a toddler, a little bit older. And a woman was playing with a toy and having fun and engaged. And it was a happy experience. She handed the toy to the child. He played with it. Fun, great. As they're playing, a third person walks in the room and sits kind of in the corner. And the initial woman is continuing to play with this toy. And that woman responds in anger and kind of explodes. Why are you playing with that? Her tone, her facial expressions, her body language, all is projecting, this intense anger. And then they pass the toy to the child that he was just playing with it, 5 minutes ago. And they wait for 20 seconds to see what he does. And he sits there in stillness, does not touch that toy, doesn't do anything. And what it really demonstrates, I think, is that children are so much more aware than we realize. And they're watching their community to teach them, how do I act? How do I behave? What is good? What is bad? How do I be a functioning community member?
Yeah.
And we're losing that. I mean, when his only exposure is our immediate family, there's so much he's missing out on in the world, and different people and perspectives and ways of handling things. And it's crucial to their development to learn how to be in the world from other people as they're in the world, and they're not right now. And I think not only is it heartbreaking, I think there's a real cost that we might not consider.
Absolutely. And then you'll see this sort of like at the other end of it, which is when you're looking at elderly people too, which I know they've done a lot of studies on the importance of, elderly people, especially when they're in nursing homes, to have that connection.
Yeah.
And there was that, I don't remember what it was, but there was a sort of long study of incorporating animals and pets into retirement communities and into these homes, and it totally transforming the health and well-being of these elderly people that were not doing so well.
Yeah.
So this idea of livening the spirit through connection is such an important conversation, because we are being pushed up against a lot of sort of demands to isolate yourself. And although we want to be cautious and we want to be responsible and we want to make sure that we're all taking appropriate precautions, at the same time, we have to think really, really hard about at what cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I'm curious specifically about your daughter in relation to this, because she has special needs.
Yeah.
And for you, I would assume she's, because there is sort of a vocal barrier there in terms of her abilities to communicate.
Yeah.
That physical touch is a huge piece.
Yeah, it's huge. It takes a long time for her to build that trust with other people. She has sensory perception issues. So in her tactile system, her touch, she feels touch much more elevated than most people. And so a lot of textures and surfaces are uncomfortable to her because she feels differently than we feel. So it takes her a long time to establish a bond with someone where she's comfortable, especially in her hands, with them touching her hands, holding her hands. So that's been a real heartbreak for me. Our kiddos go to the same preschool.
Yeah.
And she had just started to build some of those connections. One of her teachers mentioned that she reached out to hold her hand last week, which is in Ellie, that's my daughter's name. In Ellie's world, that is a huge treasure and step forward. And so to lose opportunity for that and kind of the ground covered there is pretty sad.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. But there is light,
Absolutely.
and I think making sure that as we're having these deeper conversations, that we do find light, and that there is ways to still connect. Obviously, virtually is not the best way, but thank goodness for FaceTime. Thank goodness for Zoom. Thank goodness for these, Facebook Lives and these other ways to connect with people through this time. But it is still important that we acknowledge this sort of connection. Like, like I want to touch your hand, and that is okay.
This should not be revolutionary, and
it's, energy always is moving and going in different directions. So the energy that you throw out, somewhere, something is going to receive it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just leave, it stays and it just transmutes and goes. And we see it in this, we see it in the table, we see it in our clothes. And I mean, it's all energy, and we're, and most of our audience is well aware of that. That's like, yes, we understand that. That's not a concept, that is science. And so, there is the sort of like, I say something to you, and hopefully it's nice and it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
But there is a different element of like when I'm holding your hand and I'm saying something to you.
Yeah.
It's this extra element of intimacy and reassurance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just like that can go extremely wrong. And it can be extremely harmful. The other side of that is it can be so impactful and healing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell a story relating to my grandfather-in-law, who was on his hospital bed and on his deathbed. He had sepsis, he had multiple brain surgeries, and it was a really it was a really emotional process to witness, because I saw a lot of people in sadness around him, and thank goodness from where I was sitting, one step remove, and my husband, who this is his grandfather, also was able to remove himself a bit. And, there was one night where everyone was discussing the fact that the reality is he's probably not going to make it. And that was the night that I said, Ryan, we need to go and we need to give that man a foot massage. And we sat there and we gave this, this man who hadn't eaten, was on a feeding tube, couldn't talk, couldn't communicate because he had multiple brain surgeries that was impacting his speech. Yeah. And what we realized is that he just wasn't being given the tools and the opportunity that he needed to liven back up. And, a few hours of giving that man a foot massage and, giving him some sort of guidance on how to communicate with us about how he feels, all of a sudden it was like, he was sitting up the next day, and then he was walking, and then he was out of the hospital, and now he's at home. Yeah. And so I just want people to realize the power within this idea of connecting human to human, specifically intimately around, from a centered place of love, and that impact that it has on our physicality. Yeah. And what that means for us and how we move through life. And, the fear state, what that does to the immune system. Yeah. I mean, can I ask you, when you went through your experience being raped, how did that affect you physically?
Yeah. So I was 15 at the time, and I kept my experience to myself. And within that year of processing and holding deep hurts internally, I developed Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease that attacks your thyroid. And knowing more now, my fight or flight response was so intense.
Your cortisol levels were just
through the roof, that my own body turned to fight itself. And I mean, I went to doctors who said, these are the blood tests of a 80-year-old woman. It's hypothyroidism is typically seen
later on in your life. Yeah, like perimenopause, menopause is when you'll often start to see those sort of onsets. Yeah. So
in all external regards, I was a healthy 16-year-old, and that didn't make sense to them. And now, knowing what I know about how our mind and our body are connected, it's very obvious to see that trajectory of I was deeply, shaken, and that manifested itself in my actual tangible physical body. Yeah. Forever. I mean, it's something that I continue to have to unpack. And I think one interesting study I found was last night I was reading this PubMed study about, so they took 400 people and they monitored them for 2 weeks, and they questioned their perceived sense of community support. And they also tracked how many hugs each person was getting in a day. And then they took all of these people and they quarantined them for 2 weeks. And they introduced a virus, a respiratory virus into this, population. And the overwhelming predictor of immunity, of quick healing, was the people who had high senses of community support and who were hugged more. So I think what you said earlier is really important to reiterate. This isn't this stuff feels good, this is
science.
Measured science that is showing up in our bodies, and is worth talking about as we fight to preserve life, as we combat fear. This should be at least a part of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And, how do you, what is living for somebody? Mm-hmm. What defines someone truly living? Because we can be there's the concept of just I wake up in the morning and I get up and I, move throughout my day. And I breathe in and out, right? There's just the basics of life. But then there's living, there's the feeling of being inspired, of having passion, of being motivated, and figuring what those drivers are for you.
Yeah.
And a huge part of it is uncovering the fear. Mm-hmm. It is really looking at where do you hold fear? And is it actually real?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the issues I strongly believe around accumulating fear behavior in your body and in your psyche is that as soon as that starts to mastize and actually create form within your body and hold, because you hold on to that energy, and if it doesn't leave, it will store itself. Mm-hmm. Just like if you have too much sugar and your body doesn't process that energy, then it's going to store in your fat cells. You know, it's the same process that happens. And at what cost do you think that is it worth that?
Yeah.
Is that how you want to, is that the type of energy that you want to continue accumulating within your physical form? And it takes a lot to rewire it. For you, and I know for myself, I'm just in the beginnings of really rewiring my brain and my physical body to not want to fight itself.
Yeah.
Because when you go through these traumatic experiences, the reaction is, I'm a warrior. Mm-hmm. So I've got to fight.
Yeah.
And when your body's in this place of always fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting, it becomes accustomed to that type of behavior. Mm-hmm. Something's wrong, I'll fight through it.
Yeah.
And then you move into this place where all of a sudden you're like, I am chronically in warrior mode all the time, which, for women especially, it's gonna show itself in the reproductive organs, which obviously is directly related to thyroid, which impacts metabolism. So it's, physical touch, it's the first connection metric you have when a child is born.
Yeah.
It's the first thing. It's at the core of your first experience in life.
Yeah.
And so as we are pushed and pressured to devalue this for the sake of staying safe, so we have been told, I want to open up the conversation around the bigger representations of what this actually means. Yeah. We've seen skyrockets in domestic violence cases, in suicide cases, particularly in children. Yeah. And so, these are things that are not going to leave as we continue to to devalue the importance of physical connection.
I actually went to the dentist last week because I had cracked a tooth, probably from clenching my jaw in stress at night, just here in our little town. And they said the amount, like right when COVID started, the amount of cracked teeth we have is crazy. Like we're doing these, exponentially more than we used to. And so on big global levels, we see, and the stress impacting people, but also, in these small communities and things like your teeth. And this was a big light bulb moment for me last night, was realizing that, as we asked this question of like, what does living out of this place of fear look like, zoomed out? We don't actually like have to wonder. There are some incredible stories throughout history that show us. The one that I am most familiar with and very passionate about is Hansen's disease, known more commonly as leprosy, on the island of Molokai. Do you know anything about this?
Please share the story.
So Molokai is a small Hawaiian island and pretty rural. And there is a peninsula off the coast where it's the highest sea cliffs in the world. So there's this small, I think it's like a few acre peninsula at the bottom of these huge sea cliffs on the island of Molokai. Starting in 1860s is when Hansen's disease started sweeping through the native people of Hawaii. And you'll hear a lot of things that sound familiar, but they didn't know a lot about it. They knew that it was spreading and that it was contagious, but they had a very limited understanding of how it spread and how contagious it was and who was being affected, why, all of these things. And out of a place of extreme fear and that mentality that you're talking about of like preserving life at all costs, the peninsula off of Molokai was made into a leprosy colony. And so starting in the 1860s, people would be teachers, healthcare workers, government workers would be incentivized to report cases of leprosy that they saw in the community. So a child might go to school with a spot on them. The school nurse would be given money to report that child as having leprosy. Someone would come to that child's home that night, and in the morning they would be taken, put on a cattle barge, and shipped to this desolate peninsula for the rest of their lives, to never see their family, to die in this place. The history, I've read books and books and books, and it is devastating. Families ripped apart. A community turned against itself, all out of fear, reporting each other. And it just, all of the sacred things of humanity stripped away. This continued all the way through the legal, banning of people to this peninsula was lifted in 1966.
Wow.
And there's still a handful of patients that live there today. And there's amazing stories of human perseverance and strength. But what I go there often to, when we're on Molokai, we go there a few times a year, and I look out over, the peninsula. There's a lookout where you can go and pay respects. And so often my feelings have been like, how does something like this happen? And here we are seeing exactly how something like that happens, where fear just overtakes an entire culture. Yeah. And what you lose is people's humanity. Yeah. And caution and wisdom and safety is so important. But when our fear drives us to a place where we stop seeing people as people, we stop seeing the sacred as sacred, yeah. We do horrible things. Yeah. And if you know anything about Hansen's disease, all of those measures were completely unnecessary now that we understand how it spreads, how contagious it is, all of that. So that's, a century of gut-wrenching heartache motivated by fear that was ultimately unnecessary.
Yeah. And it starts in the home too. And it starts in, trying to, obviously, like you did, you shelter your son. And with Eli, who's 8, he's old enough to ask those questions. He's at school and he's wearing a mask. And so he's like, when is this going to end, Mom? And it's a heart-wrenching thing just to tell him, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I don't understand. Like, is it gonna, it's like, is it gonna hurt us? And I have to tell him that no, it's not. And you have absolutely nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah. And I think for people watching, there's probably a gut reaction that says, well, what about the death? What about the pain and suffering? That is very real. I think
very real. But what good does that do to have that type of language put on a child? Yeah.
And it's worth thinking about in this time, like, what is our relationship with death? And in our home, it's made very clear, like, this is not something we're afraid of.
Yeah.
So
it's as sacred as birth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we respect it and that process, just as we respect the process of birth and delivery, which we could argue is being less respected these days, which would be a whole other conversation on the birthing process and how it has been commercialized and westernized. But overall, if you are someone's rooted, and really, and love this earth and love, the process of life, a part of that aspect is to acknowledge this wonderful, sacred process of death. Yeah. As you come in, we're all on the same path. There was a woman I had on this show and she was like, we are all on the path to death. Yeah. And it's so true.
And there's beauty in it. There's nothing to be afraid of. And, I think we're fighting nature when we give up everything to avoid death. We're fighting nature when we, work against the microbiome, the virome. I really think there needs to be a collective shift or just asking ourselves the question of, like, is this all against me or is it actually for me? Is there beauty in it? And could it be something that I actually embrace and can let go of that fear and that safety first mentality? Because safety first leads to a crappy life. Yeah. Micro this week, I don't know if you've seen it, but he posted this wonderful thing about, like, safety third. Like, a lot of the beautiful things in life happen when we don't live by safety
living
first.
Dangerously.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My husband, he told me something, which I'm sure I'm sure he's like the encyclopedia, and all of a sudden he just comes with all this information. And, he said, hard times make strong men. Strong men make easy times. Easy times make weak men. Yeah. And weak men make hard times. Yeah. And it's enough said.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have an immature masculine presence coming in. I sent you a text about this week, in so many areas of our world, but definitely in healthcare and the way that we see health in the body, of, like, this kind of broken fix-it mentality, that is the immature masculine.
And the beautiful thing about this, all of this stuff, right? And all of the things that we're talking about, because I feel like there is this sort of process where we have to, like, we're talking about this. We're going to really let this out. But within that, know that there are so many people right now that are actually taking the initiative while we're in this to say, oh, no. Yeah. No. Like, mama's putting her foot down. No. Yeah. And knowing that if you are one of those people, that you are not alone. Yeah. And we will respectfully continue to move through this gracefully as goddesses that we are. Yeah. And we will make sure that our roots are steady and stable, that our home life secure and full of love and health, because we realize that actually stems from us.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and that we, as we sort of respectfully deny this sort of situation,
this mentality,
that from it is going to come amazing opportunities to heal and transform the way that the medical field operates.
Yeah.
You know, the way that we view health, which I think we're actually at this stage where, because we have all this information, you can go and learn about the importance of microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
Right now.
Yeah.
You know, all the information is there, but what needs to happen is, what you're starting to see is people are starting to take all of this information and then translate it in a way that is relatable and palatable for the masses.
Yeah.
So it's like, no one's going to go read the study like you read, right? You know, and so they actually need to be handheld.
Yeah.
And shown and understood, and then held accountable for making these changes in their life, and making those transformations so that they can view life and death as equal partners, and view the way that they relate themselves in the world, you know, in a way that's productive, and not isolating.
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, if you're feeling some of those same like pushbacks inside yourself of like, this just doesn't feel right, I don't want to live in this mentality. I do think it's really important that you know that you're not alone. And
your tuition, like, do not let anyone override your intuitive, divine intuition.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is, we have been conditioned over many generations to devalue our intuition and to be told what is valuable. You know, we started young in our little desks, being fed information that we were told was what we needed to know and what was important. And I'm here to tell you that we can throw all that away right now, and that we get to go back to our cores and back to who we truly are, and determine that for ourselves. And then continue this new philosophy in through our children. And it is a beautiful time to be living right now. It just happens to be very uncomfortable because we have to talk about some of this. Yeah. We have to just openly say it for what it is.
Yeah. With so much respect for the people on the other side who you should have full freedom to say, like, I want to live safety first.
Absolutely.
Life is worth preserving to me at all costs. I just want the freedom to choose something different.
Yep.
So in complete respect for people who feel, who do want to approach this differently with a different mentality, I just ask that respect in return, like that. Absolutely. I let you follow your intuition, let me follow mine. And I'm trying to very wisely and compassionately look at where I might stand up and take the risk to say, you know, I actually am not going to do that. We talked about one of the measures that just went into effect this week in where we're at here in Washington, is that singing in church is no longer allowed. Music, and the ability to worship in a group of people has been taken away. And you know, I'm thinking through, like, will I push back against that? And for other people who might be feeling some of that, just know that if that is a step you take, there will be people to stand alongside you. Yeah. Please don't put me in jail, anyone. but that's just where I'm honestly at.
Yeah.
Some things are sacred and worth fighting for.
Yeah. It's such an interesting, I never thought we would be having this conversation. Yeah. Never in a million years.
In our lifetime. Yeah. It's crazy. But what a gift. I mean,
but then when you look back and you kind of look at where history and then you see kind of where things are going, you're like, well, I guess it does line up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And what a gift to be able to be called into our intuition and use our voice. I wasn't ready for it, but I'm glad to be called to it, and I'm ready to step up to that calling and And there's, I mean, like you said, easy times make for weak, immature, masculine expression. And I don't want that. So bring on the hard times.
That's right. Bring on the hard times. Well, I think we're ready to close.
This has been so good.
You know what? Let me open up real quick before we close and see if we have anyone. If you are watching us live, I'm going to open up and see if we have anyone who has any questions for Sydney or I.
I'll just say while she's doing that, we're drinking Throat right now, which is one of Ashley's formulations. You can promote yourself probably much better than I can, but I'll just say it's been a life-changing concoction for me. And as we talk about using our voice and stepping into our power and all of that, it's a great tool to check out if you are feeling like you want to step up and use your voice.
Yes. It looks like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see everything. Let me open up real quick.
There we are.
There we are. Let's see. I don't see any questions right now, but I see a lot of great comments. Sarah Davis says, "Oh boy, the westernization of birth." Yeah. Don't get me started. Sarah, I think you're going to have to come on the show next and we can chat about that. That would be a powerful one to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely wonderful. And
Thank
I look
you.
forward to having you on again. And I see many more conversations like this to come. If you are watching the show and you have something interesting that you would like to share, or you are listening to the show and you believe that you have something that you would like to share and bring value to the Sunspice Wisdom Show, along with our community of women, please feel free to reach out to us. We also have formed a beautiful group of divine goddesses on the Facebook group called, oh my gosh,
Expressing.
Let it come out. Please express. It is called Expressing Your Inner Goddess. We are a community of women that we speak truth.
Yeah.
And through that, we are also working on doing a lot of self-health and wellness development,
Healing.
For women who have dealt with traumas of all kinds, which pretty much we all have to a certain degree.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a great place to come, find community, and work through some of these transformations in a pretty structured setting, but with the support of other like-minded women. Yeah. So we invite you into that group. And we invite you to continue to follow along the Sunspice Wisdom Show as we continue this journey of sharing these stories, powerful stories from people. And I just want to close out by saying, if you are a woman who has been a victim of any sort of sexual trauma, of any domestic violence trauma, you are not alone. And I strongly urge you and support you in joining our group and working and processing through some of this stuff. A lot of times, like Sydney and I, we've worked through a lot of the morning stages of it, and we're actually totally focused on trying to heal the physical components. Yeah. And a lot of women, especially at this stage, we've mourned, we've felt it, but with that process, we have realized that physical aspects of the trauma have formed within our bodies. And now we are moving into that phase of actually releasing and working through these conditions that may have formed through that process, which comes from, or that process looks like a lot of nutritional support, a lot of research, and programs that are actually designed to help heal the body physically on a deeper level while we're connecting the emotional trauma with it to work through it. So thank you so much for watching today's episode, and we look forward to hearing from you and sharing our next episode next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.